Okay, cool. All right. And then from this point, I'm going to have to close a few things down so I can see my end of things. Okay. So I'll get started. This is I have a lot of stuff here. This is kind of a compilation of a lot of years of work out here and data. Um, I've been here now for 35 years, and there were people before me, and there's a lot of stuff. My experience with the district actually goes back quite a bit further. I was a South Eugene High School graduate, so I grew up in this area, and I actually saw my first bull trout in 1969, and my future wife and I were up Fall Creek looking for some fishing spots. We kind of got sidetracked on some roads, decided to go down the hill to the Middle Fork Willamette, got down to the bottom, and the river was going right to left, not left to right, like we expected. And so a few um, twists and turns there, we finally figured out we were at Finn Rock. And so we said, we'll fish here. And on about her third cast, Annie caught about a 17-inch bull trout. And it was the first one I'd ever seen up here, that other than one frozen in the Nimrod store. And we admired it for a while and let it go because we knew that it was pretty rare. Um, Another thing that happened was, that was kind of my initial look at a bull trout, and I ended up working on them in the Deschutes, Klamath, and here in the upper Willamette basins for most of my career. Um, by the time I got back from the east side of the Cascades, I we had very few bull trout left in the upper Willamette Basin. The North Santiam population winked out in the 1940s. The South Santiam population was gone in the 50s, the Clackamas in the 60s. And we had one bull trout that we recorded in 1989. That was the last one that we saw out of the Middle Fork population. So that basically left us the McKenzie as our legacy population of bull trout in the upper Willamette. There are a lot of reasons why we ended up not having bull trout in a lot of these basins, and a lot of reductions even in the McKenzie due to hydroelectric and especially flood control dams built in great numbers in the Willamette. We also had because of a lot of it because of the dams, we lost our prey base for bull trout, Chinook salmon, and those fish just were not provided fish passage above the dams. That was successful anyway. We also did in 1960. There was a road known project that took place in the Middle Fork Willamette. That was prior to them closing the Hills Creek Dam and filling up Hills Creek Reservoir. So that didn't help bull trout population up there. And the habitat in the main stem streams, well, even in the tribs, were quite a bit simplified by gravel mining, diking, urban infrastructure, forestry and farming operations. Just took out a lot of the diversity that we used to have in these big river systems. We also had a large hatchery program that was implemented in the 1950s to mitigate for lost habitat due to the flood control dams. And those hatchery fish attracted a lot of anglers, and those anglers caught a lot of fish, and there were no regulations that differentiated between hatchery and wild fish at that time. So they were all caught. You have a lot of hatchery fish and not too many wild fish. You're going to hurt the wild fish populations with a take fishery. Non-native species such as brook trout were also released into waters of the basin up here. Unfortunately, brook trout are good at hybridizing with bull trout. They're in the same genus, and they produce sterile offspring. So those high numbers of brook trout out there and low numbers of bull trout basically equates to elimination of bull trout populations over time. Like I said, obviously all these things over time drop the bull trout population down. And because we didn't have any regulations that asked for the release of bull trout until 1992, it's no wonder the numbers crashed in the Willamette. So Norm Coyer, who caught this fish in 1989, actually released it into the Middle Fork Willamette that was just above Hills Creek Reservoir. We never saw it again. So in 1990, we were left with these populations. Basically, we had the McKenzie population, main stem population. We had a population upstream from Trailbridge Dam, and we had another population at above Cougar Dam. And geneticists have actually looked at all of these populations, and basically, they're all the same, but there are some subtle differences between them, mainly due to the potential of them going through bottlenecks, having low populations. In the early 1990s, we formed the Upper Willamette Bull Trout Working Group. We had Jim Capurso, Dave Bickford, and Del Skizik from the Willamette National Forest, Mark Wade, Mary Hansen, and myself from ODFW, Ron Rue from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Given what we knew about bull trout at that time, we decided to go through or get a number of objectives out there that would maybe bring us to a better situation for bull trout populations. We knew that we needed to do something with angling regulations and hatchery trout releases. We needed to restore migration paths through dams and also underneath roads. There were a lot of potential habitat projects. At the time, we were really touting large wood, and we found that large wood was pretty important to bull trout. We needed to also look at getting the prey base back to especially those populations that were in tough shape, like above Trailbridge and above Cougar. And then, trying to do something with monitoring those populations. That's super important. It doesn't matter what you do up here if you can't tell if you made any progress on it. So our basic goal was to attain population health and long-term sustainability of bull trout and their habitat. Our metrics were fairly simple. It was we needed to increase the trend in population size. That was one of the metrics. We also were looking to try and get a population between 400 and 600 adults. That was a geneticist's target, around 500 fish back then, that was good for long-term genetic health. And then we wanted to maintain the future options for expansion, being able to move bull trout from good populations into areas where perhaps they were at one time and are not now. So I'm going to run through some examples of the work that this group and its successors did over the past 35 years or so. It's a lot of stuff, and I'll try and get through it fairly quickly. We started out, like I said, with angling regulations. We made harvest of bull trout illegal. We implemented adipose fin clipped only fisheries. In other words, if it was a wild fish, it had an adipose fin, then you couldn't keep it. That took the onus off the angler to identify the species. All they had to do was identify the fin clip. And we knew this was a pretty good practice because it worked very well in the Metolius River. We also prohibited bait in most bull trout waters, and we discontinued trout stocking in some key areas to try and reduce the incidental catch of bull trout by people targeting hatchery fish. So prior to the 1990s, most of the bull trout waters were impacted to some extent with trout releases, but that's all the red stuff in there. By 2014, we only had a couple of key spots left, and one was the McKenzie River from Hendricks to Blue River, Hills Creek Reservoir, and Salmon Creek. Me, and some others were highly criticized for these changes at the time. This was back in after 2000, before 2015 or so, and we impacted a lot of things. We impacted the lodges, we impacted the guiding industry, anglers in general. And they actually did have a right to complain when you start looking at what we saw there for angler use. In the stocked areas, we had about 5,700 angler hours per mile of river. In the unstocked areas, we only saw about 420 angler hours per mile of river. 13-to-1 difference. That creel survey was pretty eye-opening when we got done crunching the numbers. We also did a preference survey, and 93% of the anglers fishing the McKenzie wanted to see the hatchery program either maintained or increased. And so it's obviously we got hammered pretty good by folks that did not like the changes that we made to the angling regulations and stocking. We also took an idea from Idaho Fish and Game to educate anglers on bull trout identification. It was really successful in Idaho, and we think it was pretty successful here also. Big signs, you couldn't help but see them when you drove by. And actually at Hills Creek Reservoir, we had one right on the outhouse. So if you're standing in line, you're going to see it. So in the early 1990s, we started reintroductions to waters where bull trout previously were found. And the source population was Anderson Creek, and it's right in between Olalley and Sweetwater Creeks, our first reintroduction sites. We also, in 1997, implemented a reintroduction program on the Middle Fork Willamette, taking fish all the way from the McKenzie to the Middle Fork. Interesting process. We evaluated a whole bunch of options on how to accomplish these reintroductions, and we concluded that transporting bull trout fry was the smallest biological risk to the population in Anderson Creek. And so that's what we use for all of our reintroductions. We had a screw trap on Anderson Creek. That's the highway culvert right below the 126 there. and we capture fry out of that trap. The fry were not very big, uh, pretty tiny, and then we would hand place them. That's I think that's Dave hand placing a fry into Sweetwater Creek, and we did that for 7 years in Sweetwater Creek, um, beginning in 1993. Toward the end of that time period, we were well, actually during that time period, we figured if the fry survived, we're going to have some way for him to get back. We had about a 6 to 8 foot drop in the culvert going underneath 126 into Trailbridge Reservoir. And so Jim Capurso led a team that got Fish Passage culvert installed in collaboration with Oregon Department of Transportation. And that was no small feat. That culvert was, we had to shut down a major highway to get that in. And it's still functioning really well today. The culvert itself is actually right underneath this overflow culvert here, and so it's at water level. And this is the extra water that is not needed for going up through the bypass pipe. We were starting to release fish into Olali Creek after we were successful in getting a ODOT assisted fish passage culvert in Olali Creek in Highway 126. And Dave Bifford snorkeled down through the culvert just soon after it was done, and here was a bull trout in the culvert. And so we said, guess we don't have to put too many fry up there anymore. It was actually, we had a red that same year that we had the culvert installed. We released, we as in Jeff Ziller, Mark Wade, decided to release a whole bunch of excess hatchery Chinook adults into bull trout waters above dams. Back in 1993, we did it above Cougar and Hills Creek, and then above Trailbridge in 1997. This project worked fabulously. There were tons of Chinook hatching out of the gravels up there in the unused waters above these dams. And those fish went down into the reservoirs and grew to pretty good size. It was evident from that production that the potential above these dams was really high for getting Chinook production. And when the fish were then listed in 1999, that was a problem for the people operating the dams, having a listed fish species up there. Also during the 1990s, the Willamette National Forest built a whole bunch of habitat projects, and especially the McKenzie Ranger District implemented these projects. And we had Jim Capurso there and Dave Bickford, so they were really interested in bull trout and got a lot of good projects in there. Notice the costs of those projects here are quite a bit less than what we're seeing today. So. And then 1999, fish was listed, and all of a sudden we had a lot of people very interested in joining the table with the bull trout working group. A lot of new collaboration on projects on how to recover upper Willamette bull trout, and really a lot of energy right off the bat. During that listing process, we were in the middle of reintroducing bull trout to the Middle Fork Willamette from Anderson Creek on the McKenzie. And in the early 2000s, we were expecting some maturing adults. So we decided maybe we ought to put a little bit of gravel in those cold water springs up there that were almost devoid of gravel before the fish got there. So we got another project going. This was a collaborative project between ODFW and Willamette National Forest, funded by ODFW's Restoration Enhancement Program. We contracted a helicopter who loaded gravel into a bucket, flew it into our spring areas, and dropped that bucket down right down to the river, as you can see here. And then that's me. I'm pulling a lever that releases 2 cubic yards of gravel at one shot, and then I spread it out and hit the right thing. We had a red that first year. So our timing was good. We managed to get substrate in there prior to the adults coming back. Also in the Middle Fork, Willamette, we had Doug Larson and his team of on the Middle Fork Ranger District putting in a whole pile of work trying to increase bull trout spawning rearing habitat in the Middle Fork and the creeks along the edges. Logs, gravel, culvert repair, and decommissioning roads were all part of that effort. With the Carmen Smith hydroelectric project relicensing, eWeb has started implementing projects for bull trout above Trailbridge Dam, including large wood and gravel placement, as well as flow augmentation in the streams. It continues even this year. We had 115 pieces of large wood placed into Trailbridge Reservoir, and they also put some large trees over into the McKenzie River above Trailbridge Dam or Reservoir, and then added 2,000 tons of spawning gravel to that area. Bull trout did spawn in that this year. So around 2015, Paul Powers, Kate Meyer, Jared, and Johan Hogevorst and others created some amazingly complex habitat in Deer Creek, in the South Fork, McKenzie, in the main stem McKenzie at Finn Rock, and also in Quartz Creek this past year. And these areas are just amazing. They have such diverse habitat and create a lot of good populations of Chinook, rainbow trout, cutthroat trout, as well as lamprey and other non-game species. And bull trout are just fine eating them. If you look at this picture here, it is pretty impressive. The angling up there, if any of you have ever tried it, is actually very good. It's just that you have to be very good at climbing over wood. So to date, we have 11 projects that have been completed in the Upper Willamette, Stage 0 type projects, treated 745 acres and expended about $18 million. Also in the McKenzie Basin, we're gaining some ground on getting some additional fish passage at Cougar and Trailbridge dams. Cougar upstream passage was completed in 2010, and then Trailbridge upstream passage is hopefully going to be completed somewhere in the next 4 or 5 years. So we're hopeful that once we get those connections made, we really will have the opportunity to have just one meta population up there, and we'll have integration between those populations. So That's kind of a quick overview. If I went into detail on all that, it'd take me about 5 days. But that was a quick overview. And so where did all this get us? Um, Basically, our primary population monitoring metric is the number of bull trout reds. In other words, the nests for the eggs, which we've been counting fairly consistently since the early 1990s. There's a bull trout red. So this is the red here. This is the hole that they dig, and this is the pile of rock that has the eggs in it. Each year we quantify the number of reds for all the known spawning locations. Probably one of the least expensive projects we've conducted, and it's also really important because we can make population estimates based on having 2 or 3 fish per red. So you count up the number of reds and multiply it by a factor, and you get kind of where the adult numbers are. So our most consistent population is the main stem McKenzie. In here, the fish actually spawn in Olallie Creek, Anderson Creek, and then in the spawning channel down below Trowbridge Reservoir. Here's a depiction of where we've been and where we've come to. You can see the main stem population here has held pretty good through the 2000s. We had a lower spot here in the 2010 to 20 range, and then the last few years have been really good. We probably had we've had reds up over 80 in that population. This year it dropped down a fair amount back to these levels we saw earlier. We're not really sure why, but that's what we have. You can see the Sweetwater Creek population here in the gray bar, kind of diversifying where these, or I'm sorry, that's not Sweetwater, that's Olallie. And kind of diversifying where the fish are spawning. So that first red was found in 1994. The above Trowbridge population is characterized by 2 streams, Sweetwater Creek, where we put the culvert repair in under the highway, and then the main stem going up toward Tamalich, Blue Pool. Those fish were at extremely low numbers when we first started, but came up pretty sizably during the 2000s. You can see Sweetwater Creek here. That was a population that was completely cut off, or a stream that was completely cut off, and now is producing on a regular basis. And we feel pretty good about that. The population above Cooker Dam is maintained by one small creek, Roaring River, way up on the top up there, very cold creek, and has quite a bit of spawning and rearing habitat. We started off in very, very low numbers up there, but part of this was because we did not know how far up the bull trout were going into the whitewater. And when we did find that, we started seeing more and more reds. But then the population kept growing also. And you can see I put down the add-only fisheries that we had in there, and then the removal of hatchery fish. That seemed to take away a lot of the angling pressure up there, and the population really rebounded to numbers that were, comparable to the main stem population. This last year, though, we only found 18 reds up there, and we did a pretty good survey, so we know that's a pretty darn good number. And the reasons for that drop are, anybody's guess, but right now we're thinking it could be angling related mortality. There's a lot of action up there at the head of Cougar Reservoir and in the river. It could be that we've lost a lot of fish going downstream from Cougar Dam because we have a new operation down there that is drawing down the reservoir during the Chinook out migration, and that could be pulling bull trout out also. And then we haven't been able to put very many Chinook upstream from Cougar Dam in recent years because there hasn't been a big enough run at the coming back to the Lieberg McKenzie hatchery area to actually move fish up there. So it could be a forage-based problem also. Lots of questions out there. Hopefully we don't see the same thing next year. Like I said, our reintroduction effort was initiated in 1997 for the Upper Middle Fork. The area was basically this Swift Creek, upper Coldwater area of the Middle Fork. A lot of springs up in there, and we actually put fry into all of these areas, all the way up and into Bear Creek. So the black dots here are the translocations that we had, and you can see that we had 2,500 plus fry released into the Middle Fork on 1 year. Most of the years were smaller numbers, but you can see this little spot right here is the first spawning that has taken place because of these releases. And we had some pretty good numbers of reds up to about 15. That was the first red was about 8 years after we started the releases into the Middle Fork. These fish then spawned, and their progeny created a much bigger population, as many as 40 some reds here a couple of years ago. We did the gravel augmentation right here when that first red was showed up in 2005, that helicopter operation. So they got a lot of use out of that gravel, and then found other spots in the Middle Fork to spawn on their own. This is a kind of a anomaly here. The immigrant fire this year restricted access. We couldn't get in there until November, and by that time, a lot of the evidence of the reds was gone. We have no idea how many reds total there were, but we know for sure there were at least 18 of them, probably quite a few more. So here's where we've come. We came from a very low spot here into some pretty good numbers up here. Probably less than 100 fish when we started, maybe way less than 100 fish, and probably over 600 here in the past 4 years. This year, being a pretty good drop is a little troubling, but we're still hopeful that we'll have some bounce back next year. One thing to notice here is that it's almost all Anderson Creek in the first years, and then after we got our reintroductions and fish started rebounding in the South Fork, you can see that those populations are much more diversified. We have a lot more places for fish are spawning, and therefore a lot less risk of extinction on these fish, because catastrophic event probably is not going to hit all of them. So we're pretty pleased about that. So how do you think we've done? This was our goal. These are our metrics. First one, generally increasing trend. Yes, I think we hit that until this year. We actually did get to 400 or 500 fish, and that was something that I think in the back of our minds we were hopeful of, but weren't really thinking that we could. But we saw it. And then we do have some other options for expansion. We have looked at some other locations where bull trout existed in North Santiam, South Santiam. They have done a Clackamas reintroduction down below the falls, but it's we have fish available for reintroduction, which is great. And we have some additional opportunities. If the Corps can implement upstream and downstream passage at Hills Creek and Detroit Big Cliff dams, we've got the potential for expanding the bull trout population even further. So we did have some unanticipated results from our bull trout work. You know, it's kind of like a box of chocolates. And these are some of the things we got. One was adipose fin clip fisheries have now become normal. We started clipping hatchery trout so that anglers didn't have to tell the difference in species, just had to look for the fin clip. And it has changed the way people fish anymore. They either target hatchery fish or they don't. And they can do that now because it's real easy to tell the difference between them. And so I guess, you know, have you noticed, you know, have you gone out and fished and harvested the adipose fin clip fish? It's really unique. I had one lady that was fishing in a spot where you didn't have to keep just hatchery fish. You could keep any fish. And she was complaining that there weren't any hatchery fish placed out there. And it was just so happened it was a pond of fish that we didn't fin clip. And so she was catching all sorts of hatchery fish, could have kept any number of them and didn't because they didn't have an adipose fin, or they had an adipose fin. So pretty cool. Another thing that was unanticipated is, you know, we started releasing Chinook above these dams for bull trout food and to try and just get the fish fauna up there the same as it was prior to the dams being there. And we started noticing all the gulls feeding on fish as they're coming out in the fall. And those fish were great looking smolts. And sure enough, we had adults coming back a few years later. And it made it very interesting that when the biop was written, then we were so confident that we could get Chinook production above these dams. And we knew it was pretty darn important to have it above these dams, that fish passage actually got incorporated into the biop. And so this is the fish passage facility upstream for Cougar Dam that's in operation now. And I don't know, Chad, did you take that picture? Might have.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice picture.
Yeah. That's a Chinook coming through right there. So another unanticipated outcome was with all of this work that has been done, it actually is a potential that we're going to have an integrated population, one meta population for the McKenzie River. And that would be an amazing accomplishment. When we started working on bull trout, climate change was not even a mainstream subject. You know, what's climate change? And now we realize just how important those cascade spring sources are for resiliency, especially for bull trout. But it's also super important for spring Chinook and for other species like tailed frogs and such. it's just we have so much spring water here in the upper Willamette Basin that even a lot of global warming will still give you resiliency of bull trout because of the water that we have up here. There are some potential negative things that happened. You get a bigger bull trout population, they're going to eat more of the other fish in the basin, and that includes spring Chinook salmon. So you have one listed species eating another listed species. They all evolved together, so we're running that one as it goes. Another one was we didn't realize how getting this big population of bull trout would affect anglers, and they are really keying in on them now that they've become common. And with social media, it is, like wildfire out there. When somebody catches a big bull trout, they know where the people were, they know what they were fishing with, and it just leads to the potential for increased illegal harvest. And that may be part of what we saw this year on some of these populations. We aren't sure yet. We're certainly going to be looking into it. There's no question that bull trout are being caught all around the upper Willamette Basin in the McKenzie and the upper Middle Fork there. And, it's kind of bad and good. There's a lot of smiling faces that go along with those bull trout. And, we've had some pretty good reports, even especially from the Guides Association, on strong populations of bull trout in the upper McKenzie in the last few years. And it's interesting that anglers have come from complaining about the regulations that we put on the rivers to bragging about the number of bull trout that they've caught. So I think that's a good thing. We've come a long way from 1969 when bull trout were, pretty rare occurrence in the upper Willamette. They're caught with regularity now, and with continued good fish management and good societal concern for bull trout, I'm kind of optimistic for their future. There's a lot of partners to thank for all this work. High on that list is the Willamette National Forest, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, and Eugene Water and Electric Board, and your own Watershed Council. There's a lot of people to thank also. These are all folks that were either on the bull trout working group or in field crews. There's over 100 people on that list. I'm pretty sure I've left off a bunch of folks that probably should be on there. So this has been kind of a high-level summary of our efforts at reestablishing bull trout in the upper Willamette, and a little bit on the fish management implications. We've expended a lot of effort, a lot of funds, had some really good population increases, and had some other fluctuations in the results. But the question is it worth the effort? So I'll summarize it this way. All of these partners, individuals, have given our society and future biologists some realistic options for maintaining these really iconic fish of the upper Willamette Basin in perpetuity. And having those options, from speaking from a fish biologist point of view, is priceless. So absolutely, it's been worth it. and I can take questions.
Great, Jeff. That was wonderful. So, yeah, we've got probably about 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more, but for questions. So we can do it one of two ways. You can put your question into the chat, or go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and call on you there. So, once again, Jeff, that was wonderful, and we'll open the floor for questions. So I see Dave Kretzig and then Brian Robinson is up. Or was that clapping instead of hands?
Yeah, I was only clapping. No
All right.
question. Yes, sir.
Don't confuse me. Well, Jeff, I got a couple. I'll maybe start off. Jeff, could you maybe talk a little bit about the bulk trout use in the lower river and what you've seen in terms of migratory patterns, using the entire sub-basin and maybe extending beyond there?
Sure. That was one of the things that we first started doing when we were initializing our bull trout research. Is we actually caught some fish in at Lieberg Dam, put some radio tags on them, and then tracked them up, trying to find out where they were spawning. And that radio tag information gave us some really good characterizations of what bull trout do during the spring, summer, and fall. And they make a quick migration after getting up to the spawning areas, spawn quickly, and then head back down to the lower river again. Maybe Lieberg Lake, quite a few go below Lieberg Dam. And they'll reside down there, feed on Chinook and other things all winter long, and then make another migration back up the next year, beginning usually in April or so. April, May, June, July, they're working their way up the river. It's pretty interesting process. The crazy thing, we had one fish that was radio tagged that we tracked it right to the red. It went back down. We found it down the lower river, tracked it back up. The next year, it went to the exact same red in Anderson Creek, and pretty amazing. I do one other piece of that is we did catch a bull trout in we were seining for Chinook, juvenile Chinook in the lower river, right at the confluence of the Willamette River and the McKenzie River, and we caught like a 24-inch bull trout in the net with the Chinook. We know what he was doing. So
nice, thanks for that. Other questions?
I've got one if no one else has one.
Go for it.
Yeah, so given what you said about climate change and the importance of springs, I'm just wondering if you could speculate a bit, thinking about the Saniam drainage and thinking about trade-offs and where to put resources. How do you see that in terms of resilient habitat and sort of the trade-offs of trying to get them reestablished in another basin versus prioritizing sort of the best, coldest, most resilient habitat?
Yeah, especially the North Saniam has some pretty good springs in it that are devoid of brook trout, and that's one of the problems with the Saniam system is that we do have other species in there, and brook trout are not a friend of the bull trout, but there are a couple spots there that we could reintroduce bull trout. If we could get a base population going there, then we can maybe look at how they might expand out to other areas, and especially if we can do something to minimize or eliminate the brook trout populations, that would help the bull trout population a lot. In terms of where you can diversify and get this upper Willamette bull trout population spread out so that you again minimize the risk of extinction, the North Saniam to me is one of the highest priorities that we can look at. it has a great amount of spring waters up there. It's going to be one of those great spots for reintroduction of naturally reproducing spring Chinook also, just because of that cold water and the resiliency that area has to global warming.
Jeff, you mentioned radio telemetry. Is there still a tagging effort going on and any tracking?
There is. We don't use radio tags right now anyway. We've been using pit tags instead, the kind you put in your dog or your cat. And we use little tiny ones. And we do have a pretty good monitoring effort going on. We had pulled out a whole bunch of antennas when we lost funding for our bull trout program here a couple of years ago, but we're starting to get some of that infrastructure back in. And we did tag, I'm trying to remember how many new tags we put out this year in the McKenzie, but it was a pretty substantial number.
111.
Thank you. So all of those fish are going to be potential fish to hit radio antenna or tracking antennas in the McKenzie River.
We got time for probably one more question.
Hey Jeff, when talking about, you know, the kind of increase in angler pressure and things like that, how would you compare the mortality rate of these bull trout compared to some of the other fish that people are typically pursuing in the McKenzie and some of these tributaries? Are they, you know, as hardy as a rainbow and being handled and things like that? How does that compare?
Yeah, that's a good one, Chase. We have one of the things that we do right now is we are catching fish at the base of Trailbridge Dam with basically mooching rigs and jigs to transport them over the dam, you know, prior to having the new trap and haul facility built at the base of Trailbridge Dam. And we moved 62 fish over this year. Out of those 62, I think somewhere in the 40-ish range were actually hook and line. And they do pretty darn good if they're handled with caution. I'm not too worried about hooking mortality on bull trout from anglers. What I'm worried about is all of the holding the fish up, you know, and keeping them out of the water, and you know, people holding them by the gills and things like that. That people just don't know any better, and so that could cause some mortality. But I'm most worried about those people that say, "Hey, here's a big fish. Hardly anybody up here monitoring them. I can get away with catching one and taking it home." And when you're talking about just hundreds of fish, and only half of those are females, you know, 5-10 fish out of that population is a huge hit to our base populations up there. So that's what I'm really worried about, is the illegal actual harvest of it rather than the hooking mortality.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Oh, we got Chad. Go for it, Chad.
Hey, Jeff. I just want to say that was a great presentation. I enjoyed seeing all the old pictures and a lot of the old folks that have been involved in the project from the beginning. So yeah, great job.
I didn't miss your name on that list, did I?
No, I think it was on there.
Oh, good.
It was fun to see the old, was it Chuck Kumler or the angler Chuck? Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
All right, well, thanks again, Jeff. That was wonderful. As a reminder, this was recorded. We'll be getting this up and sharing it. If you want to view it again or share it with your club or friends and family, it'll be available. So just watch for some updates from Chase and I. So once again, thank you, Jeff. I think